We will begin shortly. I'm going to let some numbers start to level out a little bit more, letting people into the Zoom room. So bear with us for another 30 to 45 seconds. Okay, it looks like our numbers are starting to slow down a little. Welcome to the Every Learner Everywhere Strategies for Success in Online Teaching and Learning, the reprise of our interactive conference series. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on this beautiful Friday afternoon for those of us in Colorado. My name is Norma Hollebeck, and I'm the manager of network programs and services with Every Learner Everywhere. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to take just a couple of minutes out to tell you about Every Learner Everywhere and the mission of our network. Every Learner Everywhere is a collaboration of 12 education organizations with expertise in evaluating, implementing, scaling, and measuring the efficacy of digital learning and its integration into pedagogical practice. Every Learner Everywhere is one of 3 solution networks sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Here at Every Learner, we work with colleges and universities to build capacity among faculty and instructional support staff to improve student outcomes with digital learning. Our mission is to help institutions use new technology to innovate teaching and learning with the ultimate goal of increasing student success, especially for first-generation college students, poverty-affected students, and students of color. Couple of quick housekeeping notes. As we are moving forward, you will want to know that we are recording today's session, and you will be given a link to that session after the webinar is over. Throughout the presentation today, we do welcome your questions in the Q&A section. If participants raise their hand, however, during the presentation, we will not be able to unmute you. However, we will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat section and try to target your questions through those. As a biology professor and a recovering associate dean, I'm excited about today's presentation, Formative Assessment as an Instructional Strategy Using the Teaching Effectiveness Framework to Support Digital Learners. Our speakers today are Tanya Buchan and Jennifer Todd. Tanya is an instructional designer with the Institute for Learning and Teaching at Colorado State University and was the program manager for the Accelerating the Adoption of Adaptive Courseware grant at Colorado State University. Tanya partners with faculty to integrate research-based educational practices using the CSU Teaching Effectiveness Framework, as well as educational technology and learning analytic data into course design and teaching. She has interests in including in faculty development, online course design, educational technology, adaptive courseware, and active learning. Jennifer Todd is an instructional designer with the Institute for Learning and Teaching at Colorado State University, where she is leading an effort to assist faculty and administration in defining effective teaching and using this definition as a framework for setting teaching goals and improving and evaluating teaching excellence. She collaborates with faculty to help them integrate students into every aspect of the learning process, from curricular alignment to assessment, with a focus on engagement, critical thinking, and metacognition. She has 25 years teaching, curriculum design, and presentation experience. So I am going to now hand it over to Tanya and Jennifer.
Okay. Just a second. I accidentally, my screen. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you. And can you see, am I sharing at the moment? Okay. All right. Let me. Okay, now can everyone see? Okay, excellent. All right, so thank you, Norma, for that introduction. It's really exciting for us to be here today and to share some of the work that we've been doing at Colorado State with you all. Just to give you a little bit of background about Colorado State is we are an R1 institution in Fort Collins, Colorado, about an hour north of Denver. And in 2021, our total enrollment was just over 28,000 students on the main campus, so fairly large. Also, in terms of our workshop today, Jen and I really like to do highly interactive workshops with our faculty. So we tend to, we will hopefully keep you all engaged, and we like to model some things for our faculty that they can do with their students. So we also like to do that when we do these types of workshops as well. So with that, we're going to start with an activity. So what does formative assessment mean to you? And Jen just put, if you can look in the chat, in the community, or sorry, in the chat, you'll see there's a link for community board for A through K. So that for the folks that your first name begins with A through K, please click on that community board. And for the folks with L through Z, please choose that community board. And when you get there, if you could click in an unoccupied box and answer the question, what does formative assessment mean to you? And it's a huge definition of that. Let's see, I'm not seeing a community board in the chat.
Not seeing a link anywhere, not seeing a link. I posted both of them.
So Jen, can you do, there's two panelists and attendees. I think we just got it.
Yeah, it's just in the host and panelist section.
I
So
see it.
Everyone.
I see it. That's new for me. Okay, let's try again.
All right.
I've got it, Tanya.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. All right. It should be coming.
There's one.
All right.
And the A through Z one is coming.
Okay. Excellent. And we know that the question we're asking you, what does formative assessment mean to you? We know that's a huge question. So just keep it simple, you know, about a sentence. Oh, awesome. I see some folks are in there typing right now. So.
Okay, both boards are up now. A through Z, first name A through K, and then first name L through Z. Those are the two boards.
Excellent.
We're just trying not to keep it too crowded on one board. There we go. I do see people typing.
Yeah. And just kind of one thing is that we do like to use Google for these types of activities because it is anonymous for the most part. And the other thing to keep in mind as you do this, there are no wrong answers. So give you another minute or so for folks to finish up their thoughts. And Jen, did you see that message? You could post the community boards one more time.
Sure thing. I'll post them both.
Okay, sounds good.
First one's first name A through K. Second one is for first names L through Z. There you go.
All right, thank you. Okay, and we'll just maybe another 30 seconds. Again, short response, one sentence-ish. Okay. And so I'm looking over my board. I'm in charge of the L through Z folks. Jen is looking at the A through K folks. And I see a couple themes emerging from this. There's a few folks that aren't sure. They're not about that, which is all right. That's why we're here. And then the other theme that I kind of see emerging from this at first glance is that formative assessments help students test their understanding of concepts. So Jen, what do you see on your board?
I'm seeing checking progress is coming up a lot, and gathering data on student learning. Yeah, check-ins on learning for students and faculty. So we do have a lot of knowledge of formative assessment already.
Yes,
happening.
This is great. This is
Yeah.
great. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for doing that, everyone. So what I'd like to do now is we're going to shift to the outcomes of our workshop today and why we're here. But one thing you'll notice that this set of outcomes is pretty lengthy. So when we do workshops and we teach classes, because Jen and I both teach as well, we don't typically like to read the outcomes out loud, or even if it's an online class, we might take outcomes that look like this, that are pretty long, full of some edgy speak, and try to make them a little bit more student friendly. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen.
Right, and in this case, participant friendly. So if we look at the 6 outcomes here, and this isn't another way to just really, as a presenter, a way to get your audience engaged, and as an instructor, a way to get your students engaged. If you could put a number in the chat of the outcome you're most curious about today. It gives Tanya and I an idea of what you want to know. Thank you. There's people already putting numbers in. All right, and we'll let you keep doing that.
Okay.
There we go. Something that Tanya and I often do in our presentations is we share a slide of all of the engagement strategies we're using for our faculty to, sometimes when you're going through a workshop, you might not realize, oh, this is something I can do with my students. And so we always add this kind of as a bonus. These are the engagement strategies we're using today in this workshop. We did the background knowledge probe on the community board. With your, what formative assessment means to you. And then the next engagement strategy we used was setting a purpose for learning and choosing which outcome means something to you. It's a way to get participants involved or students involved in setting a purpose for their learning. We want to start off the presentation kind of setting the context of where our thinking was around formative assessment. And so Tanya and I, when we get together and we plan these workshops, we have these aha moments every once in a while. And this was our aha moment planning for this workshop, that formative assessment, yes, it's a strategy, and yes, it's something we do in our classrooms, but really it's a mindset about teaching. And what I mean by that is, instead of thinking about what am I going to teach today, it's switching that to what will students learn today and how will I know that they've learned it and to what extent they've learned it. So we think about formative assessment as a way to, yes, determine what or if students are learning, determine any gaps that they have in their learning or misconceptions, to help then focus our teaching. But then on the student side too, formative assessment is a way to have students take responsibility for their learning, which I think it's just that small nuanced way of presenting something to students to say, we just did this formative assessment, we just did this check for understanding. here's what the results could have been. If you're not there yet, here's what you can do to fill the gaps in for yourself. And so we really see this as a way to approach teaching that is just a little bit nuanced or different mindset than a traditional teaching approach. All right, Tanya. Formative assessment is, to us, it's an instructional strategy. It's a way to keep students engaged. It's a way to get students interested in a topic, a way to keep your classroom active. So it's formative assessment. It's like in the general umbrella, it's a mindset. A little more specific, it's an instructional strategy. And keep going, Tanya. And it is also a scaffold. It's a way to help students go from point A to the top of the tower, but supporting them on the way. So supporting them with critical thinking, starting off with a lower level critical thinking, lower level on Bloom's taxonomy, and then building up those activities and building up the rigor and the level of thinking to reach those outcomes. So formative assessment can also be used as that. So we're offering these 3 statements to you, and we're bringing you back to your community board. So that's the board that we opened at the beginning of the session. A through K, you're on one board. L through Z, you're on another board. If you came in late and need those boards, Tanya can post them, but let us know. And then let me open my board so I know what I'm talking about. You're going to go to the poll, and it looks like one person's already started. Thank you for that. Which statement is most intriguing to you? Formative assessment is a mindset, formative assessment as an instructional strategy, or as a scaffold? I don't know why, but it's still kind of fun for me to see the community board being populated. I don't know what it is. It's just, I think it's that like forever teacher in me that says, "Ooh, they're doing it." It's just kind of exciting. Awesome. So thank you for participating. It really makes us happy on this Friday afternoon.
So on my board, it looks like so far the winner is instructional strategy.
Okay.
On my end, and then scaffold, then mindset.
Interesting, because mine is mindset first, instructional strategy second, and scaffold third.
That is interesting. Huh.
All right, should we move on?
Okay. Yeah. Let me.
And again, thank you for participating. It helps us to see where everyone is.
Okay. Oh, okay, I'm having slight technical. Oh, there we go. All right. There we go. Sorry.
No worries. So we're back to this slide of our engagement strategies, and we decided we were going to use a polling app or something like that. We just decided that we would do the community board for the poll. So that's where we are with that. And now we're going to hand it over to Tanya to introduce you and take a step back and introduce you to the framework that we've mentioned before, and look at how instructional strategies and feedback and assessment kind of go together. So I'll give it over to Tanya for that.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So like Jen said, we want to step back for just a second and give you a little bit of background on our teaching effectiveness framework. At Colorado State, we have followed kind of the traditional instructional designer model. I've been at CSU now, I guess 11 years. Jen, you've been there 5-ish years, 6 years, something. And 5 years, okay. And so when we were working with faculty, we would find that we're kind of a small team. And so we have the similar mindset principles that we share with faculty, but we wanted to really ensure consistency, and that when we were doing consultations with them on our own or as a group, that we're all talking about the same thing. And we kind of found that it was important that we developed this common language that we could use amongst ourselves and with faculty. So that's kind of how the framework was born. And it's all of these terms, right, that you can see here, all 7, we call these domains. They're grounded in evidence-based teaching strategies. And we've actually developed this full framework that we will share here in just a minute. But with this, we wanted to make sure that we had a way that we could talk about teaching and the process of teaching simply and consistently. And so in 2018, when we first rolled this out, actually this looked a bit different. It looked more like the Trivial Pursuit pie that you would see when you're playing the game, where each domain was a different color, which I guess it still is. But what we found is that between rolling that out in 2018, some work that we were doing with faculty and across campus, and then particularly with the pandemic, we found that inclusive pedagogy was really central to all of the domains. In our original Trivial Pursuit vision or graphic of it, it was more of an equal thing, which was important, but we just really found that, you know, inclusive pedagogy spreads across all the domains. So when we had a chance to put together this new image and rethink it, we put it at the center. The other thing is that you'll notice that there's this green line around the back, and what that is, it really shows that all of the domains are connected to inclusive pedagogy. So we have our 7 essential domains. They're all grounded in the scholarship of teaching and learning. And we have examples of different teaching practices that faculty can use. And they work for both online and face-to-face faculty. So what we're going to do now is spend a little bit of time, though, with our workshop on formative assessment, is really look at the 2 that really intersect with this, our feedback and assessment and instructional strategies. And so what this is each of our domains has a document that looks like this. I believe Jen is going to put a link to the framework. Okay, she just put it in there in the chat if you want to look at this on your own. But I'll give you a little background onto this document. And so each domain has one of these pages, as I said. So on the right, we have our definition of instructional strategies. And then you'll see that we have the rubric that looks like a table kind of at the top of the document. And what this is it's really our leveled criteria that faculty can use to do a self-assessment of their own teaching proficiency. And so one thing that's very foundational to our framework is that it's really grounded in a growth model. We did not design it to be an evaluative tool. It's really for faculty to do self-assessment and try to grow. So what we would recommend a faculty member do is either when they're working with us on a particular project, or maybe at the beginning of the academic year when they're setting their goals, is to really look at this and try to assess on their own where they are. And then this tool will give them some ideas on what they might want to focus on to kind of move up and add other teaching tools to their toolkit. So then the bottom section of this links to, gives them ideas of evidence-based strategies that they can use and incorporate into their classroom related to this particular domain. Our goal, you'll see that some of these are clickable links. Our goal is that every bullet point will have a clickable link. So we're still working on that. This is definitely a document in progress. The other thing I wanted to point out real quickly is that you'll see over here, let's see if I can I will try to use the pen tool. And well, not successfully.
It's okay.
Under learning technology, there's 3 little people. So those 3 little heads mean that that is an inclusive pedagogy strategy. So, so here's an example of feedback and assessment, and it follows that same format. So with that, we are going to head to our worksheet. So like I said, we like doing fairly interactive workshops. And so Jen is going to place the worksheet in the chat. And so what this is this is actually a downloadable Google Doc. This one is not an open document. So you'll have to put that on download it on your device. We wanted to make sure that you could do your own work, not share work. Otherwise it wouldn't be manageable if it was an open document. So go ahead and click on that and download it on your device. And then I will go over this worksheet that we're going to ask you to fill out. We're not going to actually complete the whole document because we want to make sure that we have time for questions as we move through this and at the end of the session. So I'll just give a little introduction to this worksheet. And so what we've done is on here, and when you download your worksheet, you'll have this example, and then you'll see that there's an open box in the table for you to do your own work and type in your own information. And then at the bottom of that, you'll also see that there's resources. And so all of these materials actually that Jen is pasting into the chat are actually at the bottom in that resource area for you for later on. So once you have this downloaded, what we'd like for you to start thinking about, and we have this example, is when you're thinking about looking at formative assessment, really focus on topics or skills where students tend to get stuck or have misconceptions. We find that when we're working with faculty, that's typically what they're asking us about. They want to find ways to reinforce that challenging or assess those challenging topics. And so we'll give you a chance to kind of choose something where students get stuck. And then, so that's part 1 in target content. And then part 2 is how can you check for student understanding using classroom assessment techniques for multiple modalities of instruction is the name of this document. And so let me go. Okay, this is an example of that document that you will link to. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a history of this particular document. Prior to the pandemic, we had a classroom assessment technique document that we'll share with you actually in a few minutes because it has a little bit of a different purpose. But we found that we were in a situation because Jen and I, our focus are our residential faculty or face-to-face faculty. We have a different set of instructional designers that primarily worked with online faculty. And so, but as most of you, when the pandemic hit, we were faced with how do we help our faculty that are teaching face-to-face, either teach remotely, whether it's synchronous, asynchronous, or in this crazy physically distanced classroom, and still have some activities and formative assessments. And so that's where this document came from. How do you do a concept map in kind of what we think of as our traditional face-to-face classroom and different tools and how they might be able to implement that in different classroom situations. So this document gives you a chance to really look at that. So we have a little bit of, let's see, let me go one more. So a little bit of your turn at this point. So what we would like for you to do is on your worksheet, think about, and don't spend too much time, but I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think about, where do students get stuck or have misconceptions? And so in this example, this is actually a faculty member that we worked with. I think I know what she's talking about, but not completely. But students have a hard time explaining the impact of drugs or medications on neurotransmitters. So that's something that she had to reteach. So she wanted to kind of play this through a little bit more so she could be proactive and incorporate a formative assessment in her class. And then if you can think about it and you know the exact learning outcome that this aligns with, go ahead and put that in there. If you don't worry about it. If you kind of have an idea, put a little note. But why we think this is important is that we want to make sure that the things that you're emphasizing in class and in these formative assessments align with your learning outcomes. And then communicate those with your students as well. So I'm going to be quiet for just a couple minutes and give you all a chance to fill that out. So check in 2 minutes. Okay, I'll give you about another 30 seconds so you can finish up your thought. Okay, so hopefully you all had a chance to jot down some notes about your target content. One thing that I don't know if you all find challenging when you're teaching, but is knowing when to be quiet and staying quiet long enough. That can be a challenge, giving students some time to process what it is that they're doing. And so that is an important piece also when you're incorporating these formative assessments, is sometimes it's just hard to be quiet. So okay, so part 2 of your worksheet. So this is looking at how can you assess student understanding. And so this is really an opportunity to think about some of these different classroom assessment techniques. And this is that document that we just looked at before. And I believe Jen put the link in the chat.
I'll put it again just in case.
Okay, thank you, Jen. And again, and it's also a link at the bottom of in your resource list. But what we want to do is you want to look at the active learning strategy by instructional modality. So that this is an example of it, this image here, and find a classroom assessment technique that really fits with your outcome and the topic that you want to look for. One thing to note is that you don't need to do this with every topic. just think about, focus on, especially at first, incorporating formative assessment in places where students are challenged. So what I'll do is I'll just give you a couple minutes to kind of look through this document and maybe find one or two, make some notes that will then fit with what you identified as your content, that's where they get stuck or have misconceptions. Okay, I'll give you about 45 more seconds. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to find and identify maybe one or two potential formative assessment techniques that you could incorporate into your course from this list. So we wanted to shift over to parts 3 and 4, and we're not actually going to go through and complete these right now, but I wanted to just walk you through them so that you can do this on your own, because I know this kind of requires some deep thinking about it. So we don't really have time to facilitate it properly in the class, so, or this session. So we want to just kind of highlight it real quick for you. So in part 3, you would look for, let's see, goal for using a formative assessment. So you really want to think about what is it that you want to know from this? How are you going to use that information to inform your teaching, or maybe guiding students on using that information so that they can best use that to determine another step. If they want to restudy something, maybe they want to form a study group. Sometimes just giving students that little prompt of, you know, if you had trouble with this, you might want to review this or get together with a group. That's enough to get them started, and then they'll do that on their own. The other piece of it then is part 4, implementation considerations. And with that, the biggest thing is we want you to think about, you know, are there some logistics involved in this that you might need to set up, whether it's technology, setting up groups, how is it going to impact the rest of your class? I know some faculty, something we hear from them often is, I don't have time for formative assessments because I have to cover so much content. But conducting some of these formative assessments is a way to address that content. So we hope that we can help them find places to incorporate this in there. So the other thing is then, what is feedback going to look like? And how are they going to do it? So we, being a large institution, we have faculty that teach the classes of 30 students, but we also have faculty that teach sections of 330 students. And so usually when we first ask them or encourage them to incorporate some kind of feedback, the looks on their faces, their eyes get wide, they don't necessarily believe. They're like, how am I supposed to do this without killing myself? And that's where we're hoping then that this other document, the classroom assessment techniques, and this is the original document, the fourth column in here is named feedback options. And so what we did is, with all the different types of formative assessment that you could incorporate, we gave some ideas of ways that faculty could give students feedback, but maybe it's more informal, or maybe it's in the form of peer feedback, or maybe you're reading a sample. So this would be a place to look at, to think, then to determine, okay, I can do this. I can incorporate this type of thing in my class. So with that, I'm going to
Tanya,
turn it.
can you go back to the feedback one real quick?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. So I just want to reiterate what Tanya was saying about the feedback piece. If you have 300 students, you can't, and if you're having students do formative assessment, you can't grade everything. It's just not physically, humanly possible. And so feedback to students in formative assessment is so important to their learning that there are, a couple dozen ways that you can give students feedback, and also take the responsibility from you teaching students to students learning the material, and giving them that responsibility back as a gift, right? So the more responsibility you put on the students to learn the material, but giving them these scaffolded assignments and scaffolded instructional strategies, the more they learn. So that's where we go into that mind shift again of formative assessment being a mindset. So thanks, Tanya.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Okay, just going back to the engagement strategies we've used so far in this workshop. We just did the recording sheet, and that was the worksheet. So we're gonna move on.
Oops, there we go.
And just doing a little bit of a recap. The formative assessment as a mindset, to me, that idea comes from John Hattie, who did a meta-analysis of, I think it was several hundred studies on teaching. And he found that the number one effective strategy for teaching, for student success, was believing in your students. And I love that, because it's not something that you're doing physically or planning differently or doing anything differently at all, but it's this shift. And so this formative assessment as a mindset, to me, is that shift, that you're thinking about helping students learn rather than teaching them something. So just to reiterate that point again, formative assessment can scaffold learning. It can scaffold critical thinking. Choosing formative assessment at the lower blooms to begin with, and then ramping up the critical thinking in the formative assessments helps students reach that level instead of having to make that huge leap. It helps refine your teaching, and it can also be done with minimal or no grading. And I want to add to that, start small. So Tanya made the point of thinking about content where students typically struggle. Best place to start. Maybe there's 3 places in your semester where you can add some formative assessment activities, just 3 throughout the semester. And it's taking those baby steps, doing the formative assessment really well, getting the feedback from the students, seeing how things change in your classroom, and then adding on maybe one or 2 more every semester. So really giving yourself a break also, and taking care of yourself and taking those small steps.
And I think it's addicting. Once you start, you want to.
Yeah, you can't stop. Yeah, because you always want to know. You get that. It's that feedback. Like, how's it going for you as a student means that it's going well for you as an instructor. So here's some ways to deliver formative feedback. And I'm not going to read them off all to you, but there's so much you can do online. Audio comments to me are difficult. I'm much more comfortable typing away, but they're actually quicker. So if you do have a smaller class and can use audio comments instead of typing everything, that's a quicker way to offer some feedback. The adaptive courseware that the program that Tanya led for 3 years, using that courseware really well can give students the feedback they need without you having to do anything. So there's many different ways that you can deliver formative feedback that isn't going to cause you to have to work 24 hours a day. And we're going to, before we take questions, we're going to end with a community board activity. And if you could go to your community board again, and you're just going to type in, let's see where it is.
It's the post-workshop takeaway section.
Thank you, Tanya. And the question is, what have you added to your understanding of formative assessment? Even if it's a small tweak, a small addition.
That's great. Folks are already filling in.
Thank you to Anonymous Koala and Anonymous Ibex for being the first on my sheet over here. Oh, and thank you for the start small comment. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That is a message we share with our faculty all the time. Please start small. You don't burn out that way.
I have Anonymous Blobfish, and they say, do not be afraid of using formative assessments. Yes.
Yay.
Yay.
That's a good point. Don't be afraid. And if they don't go perfectly the first time, don't give up. Nothing goes perfectly the first time. Teaching.
I have another one I'd like to share. This person said, I like the idea of it being a mindset. It allows you to think about various ways of implementation.
I have a comment that says lots of good resources, and I just want to, Tanya and I and our team, there's a team of about 6 of us now that have been working on this framework for 4 years, and we know that at first glance the framework is very detailed, to put it nicely. It's a lot. And so lots to think about. Yes. What we recommend to our faculty at CSU, we ask them, well, we're recommending to departments that faculty use the framework to set a teaching goal every year. And what we've done is said, please have your departments set one teaching goal, have your faculty set one teaching goal in one domain. And we kind of get the wide-eyed, but we're PhDs, we do everything, you know, to the nth degree, and we say yes, and making one goal or writing one goal allows you to dig deep into that domain and not feel like you have to be proficient in everything that you're doing at one time. And so setting a goal in, say, the instructional strategies domain, it's going to change your classroom climate. Because if you're doing a more active learning, you're going to see a change in the way students respond to each other and to your material. So if you're digging into one domain, don't feel like you're ignoring everything else. So one step at a time, one goal at a time, one domain at a time is what we're preaching on CSU campus. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the community board.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
And I just opened the question and answer, and yes, the question is, should formative assessments always be graded? Absolutely not. Formative assessments, sometimes the way I would approach them is, if students were doing some type of formative assessment, I might have then an example of what the final ought to look like, but I don't share that with them until everyone's finished. And then I might do something like compare your diagram with the diagram that's up on this, that's been posted, or and so that students then can try something out and then compare with where they should be. And then you can say something, you can have them figure out, where are your holes then? Where's your knowledge? Where are the gaps in your knowledge? And that could be the formative assessment, that they're typing in the gaps in their knowledge, they're sharing that with their group, or they're sharing that on an assignment. And then they can share, and this is what I'm going to do to fill that gap in my knowledge. And that's to me the beauty in formative assessments being more student directed, so that learning can be more student directed. But you have to know how to use, like, what kind of language to use and what you're asking students to do, and encouraging students, you know, if this didn't work for you, if you didn't get this, here's where you can find those resources. And I know you can do it, because I believe, you know, you're here for a reason, you earned your seat here. So that's going back to that mindset thing. Like, it's a way to tweak everything about your teaching. It's a way to share with students that they can do this, that it's in their control. It's not your control, it's their control. That was a long answer to that question, sorry.
Any other questions for us? And one thought I wanted to share is just, as we think about, again, like I said, our roots are a bit more in residential instruction, but with the pandemic, we have found ways to help faculty incorporate using technology in their face-to-face classrooms. Well, I guess they're not really face-to-face anymore, but remote and things like that. And as you do more of formative assessments like we did on the community board, and this was a little bit of a different format, but students are kind of used to it. And as more faculty do it, then they get more comfortable. The students get faster using it. And it kind of has become part of their culture. So in that sense, if you're a little bit leery about trying something like that, again, give it a try, because students are really open to it. Some of them really expect it. They've had it in K-12, and your freshmen are only 3 months older than they were when they graduated high school. So, you know, so they like it, most of them. There's a few that won't, but.
Tanya and I have this conversation all the time. So we've created these 3-week online courses for our faculty on different domains of teaching. And sometimes in the threads, we have some faculty who will write so beautifully and so perfectly, and they'll write 3 paragraphs in these threads. And my thought is, oh, please don't do this for this course. You don't have time for that. Let's just get your thoughts down in these threads. This is just for thinking and growing and reflecting. And Tanya has more experience with teaching online than I do. And she said many faculty want their students to write these like really well written paragraphs in the discussion threads. And my reaction is kind of like, let's make the discussion threads a little bit more comfortable. So for an example, one of our assignments for our faculty is to watch a video and just make a list of everything they hear from one of our faculty members on like different motivation strategies. So the assignment from us is make a list of all the strategies you hear, and then put a star or make bold the one you're going to try in your classroom, and then explain how you're going to try that one. And so it's kind of allowing the LMS discussions to be a little bit more free. Not that you can't ask for writing that you can read, and you can ask for not having, like text.
Yeah, the number 2.
The number 2, there are parameters. If you can't handle seeing certain types, certain writing in your threads, then I'd say that's where, you need borders, right? Boundaries, not borders, boundaries. But there's a time and place for writing to be perfect, and then for thinking to be able to happen. So like, sometimes if I have to write really well, I can't think very creatively. And so just that kind of, I don't know, just rethinking a little bit about those threads always having to be perfect.
So it sounds like you've answered everybody's questions. I'm going to steal the screen from you.
Okay. I'll stop.
There
we go.
Everybody, this was wonderful because it was such a workshop oriented and very active. I think there were some wonderful ideas out there that people are going to be able to take home with themselves. And like you said, start small, take those baby steps, implement one little thing at a time, and it won't overwhelm you that way. I would like to, we've only got about 3 minutes left. I'd like to really thank Tanya and Jen for their time, their insight. They're workshopping you all through some of these ideas so that you can get started on making those small changes moving forward. I would like to ask our audience to take a few minutes out to complete the survey for today's presentation using the link in the chat. I have seen where people have said, I was in yesterday's presentation, it's not letting me in. It is the same survey. That's okay if it didn't get you in this time. We got some feedback from you. I'll try to figure out next time around how I can do it to where I get all the information up for all the webinars without multiple links, but that's my bad. If you're going to be doing something immediately after and you don't have time to do the survey, don't worry. The survey link will be in the email that you'll get tomorrow, as well as the link to the recording. Patty also uploaded the link to our YouTube channel for the Strategies for Success, which has all of the other recordings in there. And today's recording, it'll take a few hours for me to get it up in there for you, but give me till tomorrow and it'll get up there and you can watch today's if you want to rerun something or go through something that they had talked about. Quick reminder, we do encourage you to visit the Every Learner Everywhere website, our resources page, including the workshop page. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. This will give you an idea of what some of our future events are, and you can sign up for and participate in future Every Learner Everywhere events. Again, thank you to Tanya and Jen for such a wonderful and engaging, active experience today. Thank you to our audience for participating in today's discussion. This is our last webinar in this series. However, we do look forward to seeing you at other Every Learner Everywhere events in the future. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day and has a wonderful weekend.